I need to tell you something that I have kept inside for 7 years. Not because I was ashamed of it, not because I thought people wouldn't believe me. I kept it to myself because I knew exactly what would happen if I said it out loud. People would nod and smile and hand me a Bible verse, and the whole thing would get wrapped up in a ribbon and turned into something comfortable. And what I have to say is not comfortable. What I have to say will unsettle you. But I believe, with everything left in this old body, that you need to hear it. My name is Ruth Mae Calloway. I am 102 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in the same house I have lived in since 1961. I was a school nurse for 45 years at Bartlett Elementary School, right here in this city. I have seen children come in with skinned knees and children come in with things no child should have to go through. I have held the hands of parents who got the worst kind of phone call. I have attended more funerals than I can count. And I have buried a husband. 7 years ago, when I was 95 years old, my heart stopped. Not the dramatic movie kind, where someone clutches their chest in a grocery store and knocks over a display of soup cans. Mine was quieter than that. I was in the hospital for what my doctor called a routine procedure, a stent, something to open up a blocked artery. I had been having some tightness in my chest for a few weeks, and my daughter Carla, who worries the way other people breathe, constantly and without choice, had insisted I get it looked at. I went in on a Tuesday morning. I remember it was Tuesday because the hospital had pot roast on the menu, and the smell of it was coming down the hallway when they wheeled me in. I thought, if this goes wrong, at least the last thing I smelled was something decent. It went wrong. They told me afterward that my heart stopped for 6 minutes and 14 seconds. The medical team brought me back with a defibrillator. Carla was in the waiting room when it happened. She said they came out to tell her and she thought her legs stopped working because she slid right down the wall and sat on the floor. She is 58 years old, and she sat on that hospital floor like a little girl. I think about that sometimes. I think about what it costs the people who love us when we are on the other side of a wall that they cannot see through. But here is what I need to tell you. Here is the thing I have been carrying for 7 years. In those 6 minutes and 14 seconds, I was not in that hospital. You need to know who I am so that you understand why what I am about to say matters. I was born in 1922, the fifth of 7 children, in a 2-room house outside of Brunswick, Georgia. My father picked cotton, and my mother took in laundry. We were not poor in spirit, but we were poor in everything else. I wore the same dress 4 days in a row some weeks, and I did not think it was a tragedy. It was just Tuesday. I met James Calloway when I was 21. He was working at the docks in Savannah, and he had the kind of laugh that you could hear from 2 streets over. Not loud, exactly, just full, like he meant it completely with his whole chest. We married in 1944 when he came home on leave from the war. He had been stationed in the Pacific, and he came back quieter than he left, which I understand now in a way I did not then. War gives you things to carry that don't show up on any luggage. We built a life together. 3 children, Carla, James Jr., and our youngest, Marcus. Marcus died when he was 4 years old. A fever, 1958. There was not enough medical care where we lived for a fever that moved that fast. I have never spoken at length about Marcus to anyone. Some losses you keep in a room inside yourself, and you do not take people there. You just know the room exists, and sometimes at night, you sit outside the door. James died in 1971, heart attack. He was 53 years old, standing in our kitchen making a cup of coffee, and then he was on the floor. Carla was the one who found him. She was 15. That is a thing a 15-year-old girl should not have to walk into. That is a thing that changes the shape of a person. I raised Carla and James Jr. on my own after that. I worked double shifts at the school when I had to. I did not ask for much from the world, and I was not angry at it either. I had my faith, which was real to me, and I had my children, And I had the memory of a man whose laugh could carry across 2 streets. I want to be honest with you. I believed in heaven. I believed in it the way you believe in something you have been told your whole life and have chosen to trust, not because you have proof, but because the alternative feels like standing at the edge of a cliff with nothing below. I believed it by faith. And I knew in the private part of myself the difference between believing by faith and knowing. Now I know. There was no tunnel. I want to say that right away, because people always ask about the tunnel. There was no white light, no angels with wings, no gate made of pearl. I am not saying those things don't exist. I am saying that is not what I saw. What I saw was my kitchen. Not the kitchen as it is now, with the new countertops Carla had installed 5 years ago and the refrigerator that makes ice automatically. The kitchen as it was in 1965. The yellow walls, I painted them myself with a roller brush one Saturday while James took the kids to the park. The small window above the sink that looked out onto the magnolia tree in the backyard. The linoleum floor with the pattern of small brown squares that I had scrubbed on my hands and knees more times than I can count. The smell of cornbread. Actual cornbread, just out of the oven. James was sitting at the kitchen table. He was the way I remembered him from the good years, before the war had fully settled into his bones, before the weight of the world had gotten into his posture. He was sitting easy, one elbow on the table. His coffee cup was in front of him. He looked up at me the way he always looked up when I walked into a room, like I was something good happening. I did not move. I stood there in that kitchen doorway, and I could not make my legs take me forward. Not because I was afraid, because I was so full of something. I still don't have the right word for it. It was not happiness exactly. It was bigger than happiness. It was the feeling of everything being right all at once, after a very long time of things being only partly right. Then I saw Marcus. He was sitting on the floor beside the back door, playing with the set of wooden blocks he had loved so much in the year before he died. He was 4, the way I had last seen him, but there was something different about him. Something in the way he moved, the way he held himself, that was peaceful in a way that a 4-year-old is not usually peaceful. He looked up at me and smiled. That smile. I had not seen that smile in 64 years. Language was not built for that. My mother was there, standing at the stove, not doing anything, just standing with her hand resting on the edge of it the way she always did when she was thinking. My mother died in 1984. She was wearing the blue house dress, the one with the white buttons, that I used to see her in every morning of my childhood. She looked at me over her shoulder and said, without words, I cannot explain how she said it without words, but she did. She said, "You see? You see now." I wanted to go to all of them. I wanted to cross that kitchen and sit down at that table and stay there. I want you to understand, I was not in pain. I was not confused. I was not afraid. I was the most not afraid I have ever been in 102 years of living. And that included some moments in this life when I genuinely thought I was done. James looked at me for a long time. Then he picked up his coffee cup, took a slow sip, set it back down, and shook his head. Just barely, just once. That specific shake of his head, I knew it. In 52 years of marriage, I had learned every one of his gestures the way a musician learns a piece of music. That small, slow shake meant not yet. The kitchen began to go quiet, not dark. It never went dark. Just quiet, the way a room goes quiet when you are the last person leaving. Marcus picked up his wooden blocks and began stacking them, not looking up. My mother turned back to the stove. James looked at me one last time, and I understood something that I have thought about every single day since. He was not disappearing. He was waiting. There is a difference between those two things, and that difference is everything. I woke up in the recovery room. White ceiling, the smell of antiseptic, a sound like a bird chirping, which turned out to be a monitor. My chest felt like someone had sat on it, which I later learned was approximately what had happened. Carla was there. She had her head bent, and she was holding my hand with both of hers the way she used to hold my hand when she was 6 years old, and we were crossing the street. When I moved my fingers, she looked up. And then she did what she has not done in front of me since she was a teenager. She cried, not politely, fully, with her whole face. I wanted to tell her everything right then. I had the words lined up, but I looked at her, with her red eyes and her hands wrapped around mine, and I thought, not now. She has just spent 6 minutes thinking she was losing her mother. She does not need a story right now. She needs her mother to be breathing. I did not tell anyone for 3 years. Not because I doubted what I had seen. I never doubted it. Not once. Not even in the moments when the rational voice in my head offered alternative explanations. Oxygen deprivation, the brain creating comfort in a crisis, a dream state during unconsciousness. I have heard all those explanations. I have considered them carefully, and then I set them aside, not out of stubbornness, out of the simple fact that what I experienced was not the texture of a dream. Dreams dissolve when you wake up. This did not dissolve. 7 years later, I can still smell that cornbread. I kept it to myself because I wanted to keep it whole. I was afraid that the moment I put it into words, it would start to sound like a story. And it was not a story. It was a fact. People have a way of assuming that an experience like this would make a person more religious. My faith after it is different, quieter, less anxious. Before, I believed, but I still needed to be reassured. After, I did not need to be convinced anymore. The difference between needing a light because it is dark and standing in daylight. It changed how I sat with people who were dying. I had retired from nursing by the time this happened, but I still volunteered at the hospital twice a month. I have held the hand of a man who was afraid to close his eyes because he thought if he closed his eyes, he would not open them again. Before my experience, I would have held his hand and spoken soft words about peace and rest. After my experience, I held his hand and told him simply, "You are going somewhere. It is not nothing. It is not dark. The people you have loved who went before you, they are there. And they are waiting the way people wait when they know you are coming, and they are genuinely glad." The man looked at me and said, "How do you know?" I said, "Because I have been to the door." He closed his eyes. He passed away an hour later. Peacefully, the nurses told me. Quietly. Carla died last November, a stroke, at 66 years old. She was sitting in her living room watching the evening news, the way she did every night, and then she was gone. James Jr. called me. He was trying to keep his voice steady, and he could not. And I listened to my son's voice break on the other end of the phone, and I held on to the wall of my kitchen, that same kitchen, with the new countertops now, and I breathed. People told me they did not know how I was going to manage it. They looked at me with that look, the cautious look, the way people look at something they expect to shatter. 101 years old, losing a child. Even a child who was herself 66. That is not the order of things. That is not how it is supposed to go. I did not shatter. Not because I was not broken. I was broken. I am still broken. Carla was the person in this world who had known me longest. She was the one who sat on that hospital floor. But I also knew something. I knew with the kind of knowing that lives below thought, below language, below the place where logic operates. I knew that Carla was in a yellow kitchen now, with cornbread on the counter and a man at the table whose laugh carries across 2 streets. I knew that Marcus was there with his wooden blocks. I knew that my mother had turned from that stove and held out her arms. She went home before me. That is all. That is the whole of it. You are afraid of something. I know this because every human being past the age of 30 is afraid of something, and most of them, if they are honest, are afraid of this: the moment when the person they love most in the world is simply gone, or the moment when they themselves are gone. When everything they have built, everything they have learned, every relationship they have ever had just stops. I understand that fear. I lived inside it for a long time. I sat at James's grave in 1971, 30 years old, with 3 children at home and no idea how to do the next day without him. And I looked at that grave and thought, that is where things go when they end. The ground, the silence, the nothing. I want to tell you, from 102 years of living and 6 minutes on the other side of it, that I was wrong. I am not asking you to take my word for it. I am not asking you to change your beliefs. I am only asking you to hold this alongside everything else you know. One morning in a hospital in Savannah, Georgia, a 95-year-old woman's heart stopped for 6 minutes, and she stood in her own kitchen and saw her dead husband drinking coffee and her dead son playing with his blocks. And the smell of cornbread was real enough to remember 7 years later. I don't know all the mechanics of what that means. I am a retired school nurse, not a theologian. But I know what I know. They didn't disappear. James didn't disappear. Marcus didn't disappear. Carla didn't disappear. My mother didn't disappear. They went to a place I haven't gotten to yet. And the feeling in that place, the feeling that I carried back across that line, is the feeling of having everyone you have ever loved in the same room, and no one is about to leave. I am 102 years old. My hands shake when I pour my morning coffee. I walk with a cane that Carla picked out for me, the one with the silver handle, which I keep because of the handle. I cannot read without the large print books James Jr. orders for me online. I know, the way old people know things, that I do not have much more time on this side. I am not afraid. I have a kitchen to get back to. I have a husband's laugh to hear again. I have a little boy with wooden blocks. I have a daughter who sat on a hospital floor out of love and is now, I believe, with everything in me, somewhere with people who love her just as fully. I'll be there soon enough. And if you have someone you're waiting to see again, hold on to that. Don't let anyone take that from you. Not grief, not time, not the rational voice that says the dead are simply gone. They are not gone. They are just in the next room. And someday, for every single one of us, the wall between the rooms will come down. That's what I know. That's all I know. That's enough.